Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today what I'd like to do is to talk about some of the watches that were in the most recent announcement of the Grand Prix d'Horologie de Genève, the GPHG. What this is, for those of you who don't know, it's sort of like the Academy Awards for watches. And each year there are a number of competing watches that are put up, and then they go through the first round, and then they end up with the nominated watches. And then in November, they choose the winners of these different categories. Now, today what I want to do, I don't want to go through all of the categories. I just want to talk about the watches that I found most interesting. And on the next video, what I want to do is the most affordable watches that I found that I thought were really great that you might be interested in. But anyway, so let's get started. By the way, if you're interested in finding out more about this, you can go to gphg.org. And then you go to competing watches and you can see all of the watches, and there are quite a few of them that are competing. So let's get started. Now, the first category I'm going to look at is called time only. Now, these are watches that have hour, minute, and seconds, and that's it. There's nothing fancy about them. The first one is sort of ironic. It's Daniel Roth, called Extra Plot Rose Gold. Extra Plot means extra thin. For some years now, I've been a big fan of Daniel Roth. I like his watches. I have a couple of them. Here's one. Now, mine are in steel, and they're from the 80s and 90s when Daniel Roth had his own company called Daniel Roth. However, this is the sort of here's a quick summary of the Daniel Roth watches, where they are now. He had his own company called Daniel Roth. The company that was supporting it sort of went broke, and so his company was sold to Bulgari. And with Bulgari, they made some more watches, and apparently didn't like that association very much, but they had bought the name. So he came up with some other name that he used for a few years. Now, Bulgari is owned by LVMH. And so LVMH said, here we got this great watchmaker that's owned by one of our companies that is now owned by us. So why don't we bring them back and we'll do something with them. What they did, I thought, was very unusual. They came back with this extra flat rose gold watch and this Daniel Roth shape, what do they call it? Exio Curvex, I think, something like that. Now, LVMH has their own movement company called La Fabrique du Temps. And two of the watchmakers there, Michael Narvis and Enrico Barbazzini, are their key watchmakers. And so they came up with a movement called the DR002. DR is for Daniel Roth, but they were the two who made the movement for this. I thought it was sort of interesting. Now, this one sells for 49,000 Swiss francs, which is probably around $53,000. These things are very, very expensive, but I thought that was a really interesting one. Now, one that I very much like is Raoul Page's. His watch is called the RP2. Love this watch. Manual wind, 3 hertz. Now, this one is 89,000 Swiss francs. These things are really expensive. And one of the things he points out, there's a 12.5 millimeter balance wheel. That's a big balance wheel. And the bigger the balance wheel, the greater the inertia. And so it's more difficult to disturb. Unfortunately, once it gets out of whack because of a bang or something like that, it may take a little longer to get back into the groove again. Anyway, those are the first two from the time only category that I like. Now, there are a couple more from the time-only category. Very different kinds of watches, but very interesting. The first one is by Sartori Ballard, and it was Sartori Ballard and then X Studio Underdog. Well, Studio Underdog did the dial design for it, and it's a sunflower and a really gorgeous guilloche, I thought. The movement is by La Joux-Perret 7380. It's the name of the movement, and it was renamed SMB for Sartori Ballard B01. Manual, 3 hertz, 21,600 semi-oscillations per hour, 12,880 Swiss francs. Again, not cheap, but a lot more within hand grenade range. This, one of the things that I like that Sartori Ballard did here is that they announce the actual movement they're making, La Joux-Perret 7380, and then they said they renamed it. That's fine, because we know what it is. They can rename it, anything they want to. But as long as we know the base of it, but it's for their own work, then it makes sense to have a name for your own line of watches, to have specific caliber names. Now, another one is Frederick Piguet 21. It's a manual. Manual means manual wind. Again, 3 hertz, 21,600 semi-oscillations per hour, 28,500 Swiss francs. This is called a Ming. This is by the Ming Company, Ming Project 21. I just thought this was an interesting watch. I mean, in terms of just the design and the general look and feel of it. Now, moving out of the time only into this is, if you're competing in the men's category, it can be very rough. And the two that I found that I really liked, first of all, there's the Urban Jurgensen. It's called the UJ2 Double Wheel Natural Escapement. I won't try to explain what a double wheel natural escapement is, but because I don't fully understand it myself, to be honest. But it's an interesting thing. It's interesting horology, and I think that's extremely important for watches coming into the Grand Prix. Now, Urban Jurgensen was bought by Kari Voutilainen and a group. They bought it together, and it's been a couple years for them to get everything together, and they finally came out with some watches, and this is among the first ones they had, the double wheel natural escapement. UJ2 manual reserve, 52 hours, 18,000. They have BPH for vibration per hour, but I usually use semi-oscillations per hour, a little more accurate. 113,500 Swiss francs. That is a lot. Before Urban Jurgensen was bought by Kari Voutilainen, they were still expensive. This is my Urban Jurgensen. Trying to think of the name of it. They have some number. I forgot what it was. Jules Grenache, Jules. Grenache is part of the dial. Now this was back then was 34,000. That was the MSRP on the things, and now they're 113,000. Anyway, this other one I found that was really interesting is Masa's Pastime. Sokoku, probably said it wrong. It's a Japanese watchmaker. Manual wind, 30-hour reserve, 18,000 semi-oscillations per hour, 64,426 Swiss francs. Now, both of these, you may have noticed that they have the 18,000 semi-oscillations per hour rather than the 4 hertz. This is 2.5 hertz. You'll find that in your top watchmakers, and that's one of the reasons that I really like the lower hertz. Okay, moving right along. And under men's complications, There are a whole lot of interesting watches there, but these two I thought were for very different reasons. First of all, this one's from China, Quan Gu Biao double balance wheel. Double balance wheel. I have one with a double balance wheel by H. Moser. One of the really early ones with that, or at least early companies that are still around. This movement by AB03 is the name of it. It's manual, 18,000 semi-oscillations per hour, double, and it's got a double balance wheel. And what was done on this that was so interesting? On the front, you can see the balance wheel, and there's the balance cock, and just sort of looks cool. And then on the back, you flip it over, and you can see the other one. They have two of them. I'm not sure how they use the double balance wheel. This is my hunch, is that on my watch they put in two so that they literally balance each other out. And this keeps the shaft straight. It's like on airplanes. When I flew, I'd had to crank on the right rudder or left rudder, one of them, so the torque wouldn't during takeoff, it'd pull it one way or the other. And so we had to hit our foot on the opposite rudders so that we'd stay on the center line on takeoff. But planes with double props going in different directions, the torque evened out. And this is what double balance wheels do. Now, this next one by Frederic Juvenot, called Zen Sky Dial Orbital 24 Hours. This has got a modified Swiss movement. Now, they don't say what it is, and I don't like that, but it was, at least they tell you it was, so it's probably Solida ETA, something like that. But it was modified by Frederic Juvenot, the guy who makes the watch. The thing that's interesting about this is the dial. If you take a look at that, you can see it's a 24-hour dial, but it keeps how it comes up and how it's presented. There's also a peripheral rotor around the watch. Not cheap, $51,888. Same with the one by Quan Gu Biao, not cheap at all. Okay, all right. So those are a couple from Men's Complications. Now, the next group that I took a look at was called mechanical exceptions. Now, this is a category for things that have really interesting horology in it. The first one is, I thought, the one on the left, Hazelman and Monin. I had not heard of them before. It's called the School Watch Subscription. What this is, they call it the school watch because Hazelman and Monin, I believe that was where they first met when they were in school, and later on they went together to build a watch. Again, this is a manual line, 18,000 semi-oscillations per hour, and it has hours, minutes, and seconds, but as a mechanical exception, it had to have something else. Well, it's got jumping hours, and then it has striking on it. There's a little gong that it strikes. For those of you who are familiar with the, it was real popular, Christopher Ward, he had a watch with chimes on it. And this has a similar kind of thing. You can see the hammer there, and then there's this sort of this ring around it, and that's what the gong hits. Okay, now, this next one, the Servan watch, is called the Atom Rotation number 01. It's called the Atom Rotation because they make very, very few of these, and they name them after the client. And so this guy is named Atom, all right? So the one they made, it's an automatic 21,603 hertz, hours, minutes. Then it has called an automation cyclodal gearbox. You can see, I sort of did down below there, you can see the little gearbox. exactly how that works. Again, this is something else. This is another one of those that I picked because I didn't fully understand it, but it looked like, boy, this looks interesting. 246,000 Swiss francs. Again, this is out of my chump change, but it's a really interesting one, and there's some winding key. There's not a crown and stem, but there's some kind of winding key between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it could be like the early Seikos, like Seiko 5s. They didn't have a winder. They had something that you could set the time with, but to wind it, you had to get the automatic rotor going on it. Another really, here they're doing something very, very interesting, and that's what I like in it. I mean, even if I can't afford it, and I definitely cannot, it's fun to know about. Okay, now this next one is another pair of watches I found very interesting because they essentially have the same movement. Under chronographs, you have all these different watches with chronograph movements, and I looked at these two. First of all, by H. Mosek Company, is called the Streamliner Alpine Driver's Edition. Now, they have a sort of some kind of marketing agreement with Alpine Motors. They're motorsports, Alpine Motorsports, and they also have an agreement with and part ownership of Agenor. So Agenor makes this incredible chronograph called the Agengraph, and so it's at the base of the movement for the Moser called HMC 700. But this is a skeleton version of the movement and the watch. It's automatic. It's another feature that Moser added to the basic Agengraph. And it's for very much of a sports watch. It could have been in the sports category because it is for motorsports, but they felt that the chronograph was more important. 21,600 semi-oscillations per hour. Agengraph base, 59,000 Swiss francs. Now, Ming, called the Ming 20.01 Series 5, it's a manual instead of an automatic like the Moser. It has an Agengraph base, again 21,600 semi-oscillation per hour, 55-hour reserve, and it's 37,500. Now the one by Ming is they don't claim it to be a sports watch. I see it as sort of it's a kind of sort of chronograph, everyday sports watch, not sports, but more of a office watch or even a formal watch. It's got both of them have fascinating dials, but I think the Ming has one that is more aimed toward that. Okie doke. Now, the last two I'm going to look at are sports. These are both under the sports category, which is sort of needs some explanation. Bremont recently, maybe it was a couple of years ago, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but Bremont has had these great cases, all right, and they were very much of a company that made sports watches, but they always came up short as far as the movement was concerned. And at one time they made a claim that it was in-house, and they got called up on that because it wasn't. And so, I don't know, there was sort of a funny feeling about Bremont. And so they got a new CEO. And one of the things that he did, he came up with a caliber called B8C9192-MH. I'm not sure what everything is for. It's a manual watch, and it has a perpetual calendar and a GMT module by Agenor. And so, instead of going to the most the least expensive, they go to the best with as a movement maker, and they made a module for them. And then I guess as the base is this Bremont base movement to it, but it's also a monopusher chronograph. So it's got a lot of stuff to it. So I mean, this is something you could use in just about any sports. Now the Laurent Ferrier, on the other hand, is called the Sport Auto 79. You look at that watch and say, what is the sports watch about this? And it's sort of an interesting story, I think, because Laurent Ferrier was a sports car driver. In fact, he was a race driver that placed third in a 24-hour Monte Carlo or Le Mans race, one of those. Same race that Paul Newman used to run. And now in 1979, the best he did was third place, which is no small feat at all. And so the Sport Auto 79 is sort of more of a commemorative watch. So it would come as a sports watch. And it's an automatic with a micro rotor. And again, it's inspired by automotive aerodynamics. So it's sort of 85,399 Swiss francs. It's very expensive. So it's sort of an interesting one. Now here you're in the sports category, you got, something that, you could wear playing rugby, and then you have these two. I don't know. It's, to me, they're both very interesting for very different reasons. Okie doke. Now, having said this is the last thing I want to talk about. And that's something called the Grand Prix picks. And, oh, gee, I forgot how long ago it was. Several years ago, I started this program, I guess you'd call it, a contest, really, called the Grand Prix picks. And what it's for is to pick the winners of the Grand Prix. It's sort of like bidding on the Academy Awards, except these are the Academy Award for watches. The GPHG.org has all of the watches that are competing for 2025. And there's also a Facebook page called Grand Prix Picks. There's down below there, I put the URL for it. And then they have this big long number. I think you can find it though if you just put in Facebook Grand Prix Picks, it'll come up. And sign into it. And if you signed in 5 years ago, you're still signed in. So it's one of those that you don't have to renew every year. But it's a lot of fun. There are 3 prizes. There's the first prize, or the first one that's given away, is for the person who picks the most watches that make it to nominations. That's sort of the next step. The second prize is for the person who picks the Grand Prix winner. And then the third one is probably the most important, is the who picks the most actual winners for each of the different categories. So, I mean, it doesn't cost anything to enter, and if you win any one of those 3 categories, you win a watch. Now, not an expensive watch, but just a nice watch. So, anyway, something you might want to take a look at. That's it for today. This is an opportunity to subscribe if you like. And until next time, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection.